my name's Deanna, and welcome. We're here today with Dr. Karla Steingraber, who is the founder and owner of Everest Mental Game Coaching. And we're so excited to sit down with Prim Siripipat. Prim is an anchor, a journalist, a speaker. She's done everything from covering the Super Bowl and the Stanley Cup finals for ESPN with podcasts. And now what we're really interested, Prim, is all the work you've done about mindset and sort of how the minds of athletes work, either as they're getting out of being professional athletes. And I know you have a personal story to share with that. And also just what goes into kind of being in the game and that winning mentality. So welcome to you both. Glad to be here with you today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Prim, why don't we start with your personal story? Because you, starting from the age of 7, started playing tennis, were on the national team, and really were headed in a specific direction for professional tennis playing, and then found, I think, while you were in college, that wasn't going to be your destiny. How do you prepare for that? And then how do you embrace that mental change that goes with that?
Well, that's the $1 million question, at least with regards to the research and work that I'm doing, right? And I think the answer is that I didn't prepare. Nobody prepared me for it. I think we're embarking on a different period now where we're starting to see athletes in a completely different light, and we're recognizing them as human beings and individuals first before they are athletes, and that's the most important thing. But I was lucky, and I will admittedly say that I was privileged because my parents are both extremely hard workers. They immigrated over here to the United States, over from Thailand, in search of, like other immigrants, in search of a better life and financial opportunity. So they were really adamant about pushing for academics and always kind of pushing for that, which is, I ended up going to Duke. And so that was like a huge part of my focus. But I think from an emotional perspective, I was just not prepared at the wall that I was going to hit once tennis was no longer a part of my life. And I think it's just multifaceted. I think there's a huge grieving component. I think there's huge identity loss. I think there's loss in social support and the social capital. There's loss of purpose. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I don't think we have enough time to talk about that huge, that litany of things that an athlete really loses, especially for those that reach the elite levels. And I think that's a little bit different and that's not to say that other athletes at whatever level don't experience that, but I think elite athletes, and when I say elite, maybe people that played at the D1 or professional Olympic level, I think it just takes a whole level of different commitment. A lot of times their families are making sacrifices, time, effort, money, and therefore these athletes are forgoing a lot of aspects of their childhood, of living like a normal childhood. So, that hyper-focused mentality, really, you kind of need that hyper-focused mentality to become an elite athlete, but it also comes at a cost because, there's the premature identity foreclosure. You just kind of forget about all the other aspects of your life. And when sport is no longer there, sometimes an athlete can feel like they're left with nothing.
Sure. And does anyone suggest that you consult someone like a sports psychologist for something like that? It feels like you've worked with coaches so long. Is there anyone that's helping with that transition? Because it happens to a lot of people.
Yeah, it really does. To be honest, I don't think we really have an answer. Very early in my doctoral training, I actually just did a paper on it, and just looking at some of the recent literature and research. Right now, as it stands, there's no comprehensive framework on how to appropriately support athletes from a mental health and holistic and vocational perspective. So, and that's not to say that people aren't trying to help athletes. Obviously, Dr. Steingraber is one of those people, the tremendous people that's helping this population. But there's just still a lot more work to be done, and there's a lot more research and stuff that we just need to learn. So I think people are doing their best, and they're approaching it from the sports psychology aspect. I think there's also people that are doing it from a career counseling and vocational aspect, from a life coaching perspective, from teachers and role models. And at the NCAA D1 level, especially in the Power 5 conferences, they're doing everything that they can to really prepare these athletes. But while the efforts are great and we've made huge strides, But again, I just think that there's a lot more work to be done about creating this comprehensive, evidence-based framework about how we can really help athletes, not only from a vocational perspective, but also on a personal level, on a mental health level, on an emotional level, and all those aspects. Because I think there's this misconception that athletes come out and they are above and beyond more prepared than the general population. And while that may be true, we also see a lot of athletes that completely fall apart once they're transitioning into the real world. And that's because we make the assumption that because they have all these skills, that they're able to transfer it into the real world. And that's not necessarily the case. So that's where we have a lot of work to do.
You were playing at the elite level and doing your college education at a demanding school, and there you were balancing two things. And obviously you have the capacity to do that, but when both those things are gone, then all of a sudden at the same time, and both of those things give you a very clear structure and purpose. You know when your next training is, you know when your next match is, you know when your next exam is or paper is due or whatever it is, and you have all these schedules that keep you moving forward. And then all of a sudden after college, even just alone after college, unless you have a job lined up, what's your schedule like and how do you fill that time? And in addition to that, there are no grades anymore. There's no GPA and there are no trophies to work towards. So life is really different because it might take years until you get a promotion. So the accolades are not as immediate. How did you cope with that transition?
It was really hard. I think that's like one of the hardest things that athletes will have to face. And I think a similar population that kind of goes through like a similar transition experience is actually the veterans, war veterans, because they come out of there and they're trying to integrate into civilian life. And they also come from a very, obviously, much more intense and structured environment. But once they come out of that, as do athletes, you don't have coaches and you don't have a hierarchical structure to rely on. It's just you and nothing else. So it took me a really long time to kind of figure that stuff out. I will say that fortunately, I had a job lined up roughly 3 months after I graduated. So I kind of fell into that. So I really had my summer after college. And then by, I would say, late August, I was in the broadcasting industry and I was working about 30 hours a week. But nonetheless, it was still structure in that sense. But I think it just takes time. It takes, it's a process. And I think people could probably relate to it now, especially with the pandemic, that just the general population of like, we have all had to recreate structure, daily structure for ourselves. And for people who are doing work online and doing Zooms all the time. And now your home becomes where you work out and work and parent and sleep and eat and maybe have fun if you have time for it. So it's a very similar experience. And I think a lot of people have really struggled with it because it's just having to be creative and also figuring out your needs from so many different levels. And it's like finding out needs that it's trying to like identify needs that you never knew you needed. And I think that's been the hardest thing. So, and that's a hard thing for athletes to go through too.
Same thing with retirees who have been high level or CEOs, something like that. They really don't know how to move away from having had a career.
And they really typically don't. Like how many times do we see a lot of these C-suite executives and they retire and then it's like 3 years later, they're like, you know what? I'm going to pick up golf and go golf like 8 hours a day, or I'm going to, invest in this startup venture, or I'm going to or I'm going to go back to the workforce. I think we definitely see a lot of that for sure.
Karla, I wonder, I was surprised when you were talking about working with athletes that are getting to be at a very high skill level and are thinking of going professional. And you always talk about that when you work with them as a coach, that you still want the game to be fun. And I always had this impression that once you're a professional, like the fun is out because it's so focused. But is there something that can be done working with athletes while they're on the road up with keeping that perspective that can help across the lifespan?
Well, it's certainly a challenge because people will get really into winning, and there's a certain amount, or there's a lot of aggression around winning that needs to be there. I mean, if it's too friendly, it's not going to be much of a game. So definitely, but you can be playful with the aggression and have fun with the aggression, or see the aggression as a healthy outlet. But you will see professional players who are really trash talking each other on the court, who are later having drinks together, so they're still friends. So there's something that they're able to maintain, knowing that in the moment they're very in the zone and doing everything they need to win, and at the same time, when the game is done, it's done, and they're having fun again. So they're enjoying that competitiveness and taking pride in it without the wins or the losses destroying them or making them.
Mm. And do you see any carryover with that? I'm thinking of your documentary series that you've done on Second Life. You've interviewed so many people that are going through this. Are you seeing trends or any common themes that come out in terms of how athletes are connecting their past experience to what's next?
Kind of bouncing off of what Karla was saying about the fun aspect. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, especially if I'm talking to professional athletes, I think you lose that intrinsic part of sport, because once you hit the professional levels, now it's a completely different ball game. Like, you're not a part of the D1 level where you're surrounded by peers and student athletes and fans and just like this, like, it's the closest thing that you could find to like that youth level where everything is just like that simple, I'm playing for fun. Now you're signing multi-million-dollar contracts. You have people coming after you for all sorts of things, and a lot of people that you can't trust. There's fans, there's a huge amount of pressure from fans, from coaches, and now your livelihood is on the line. And because of these large contracts, then there's also a great amount of responsibility for these athletes to not only take care of their family, but also take care of their extended family members and anybody who comes out of the woodwork because they just signed a big contract. You know, there's just a lot of different kinds of pressure. And I think that's where the fun gets zapped out of, you know, if I'm talking about professional sports, because now this is your career and this is the way you're going to make money. And if you get injured, if you lose, if you don't perform, now everything is cut off. That's including your financial support, how you're supporting your family, how you're supporting everybody else. And also, like, your team, you might feel like your team and the fans in the surrounding community are completely against you. You know, and I think that's the reason why fun is such a delicate thing, and it can easily be lost. And I think it's happening at the youth level too, because I just did this paper on it, and there's definitely a lot of trends. And Karla, I'm sure you're seeing this too when you're talking to a lot of the kids, but you know, this concept of early specialization, this emphasis on winning, this emphasis on competition, and the business model behind it. I mean, no longer are kids just going out to the basketball court and just playing a pickup game. Now it's like you got to be playing on your middle school team, your community league, your AAU league, you know, and parents are having to spend thousands, hundreds, or thousands of dollars on their kids just to get looks and just to want to play. It's becoming a bit dysfunctional, which is a huge reason why I'm going back to school to try to figure out some solutions so we can make sport a bit more fun and use it as a vessel to help kids rather than just hurt them.
Yeah, and maybe the word fun is a tricky one, but certainly maybe interesting, because if you think about people who are successful in their careers, whatever it might be, they go into work hopefully for decades thinking this job, this pursuit, this career is interesting. I keep learning something, I keep getting better. There's a direction for me to go, and I want to reach the next level, whatever it might be. And at least it's interesting, even if it's not always, you know, we're not laughing our way through the game or the day or whatever it might be, but you feel some kind of sense of satisfaction and purpose from it. And that in and of itself is a type of fun or reward or something like that. I mean, this is how I would describe my career too. I mean, certainly I'm not having fun in the moment when somebody's telling me about their suffering, but I definitely get a lot of reward out of the work that I do. And that's the kind of thing people would benefit from searching for. Often I do see these high school athletes, for example, where the parents are already so focused on their nutrition and vitamin and mineral content and the nutrients and things like that. And did you really practice enough? And have you called your coach yet? And did you talk to this person about seeing if you can get on varsity or whatever it might be? And all the different negotiations where the parents are already almost acting like they're managers. And it's a job now, and the game is turning sour.
Yeah, I think there's a really tough and delicate balance. I personally experienced it, and that's not to say that my parents necessarily did anything wrong, but I think the problem is that when you just don't know what you don't know, and parents can be the greatest of help, but as we know, like, we could also be really hurtful to our children when we don't know what we're doing. And so I think a large part of this in my journey is really making sure that we can educate not only parents, but also coaches as well. Because I think there's a lot of misinformed and miseducated coaches, and coaches that are operating from traditional ways and ways that are archaic and do not apply in today's 21st century. So I think there has to be a huge psychoeducational aspect to this movement, where it's like, it's not the athletes, it's not the kids' fault. Like, they're just doing what they need to do. It's really helping parents and also coaches in giving them the information that they need, so they understand how to step in, when to step in, and most importantly, when to get out and let go. That's the hardest part, is as a parent, like, when do I need to let go? And that's a really hard thing. That's like one of the hardest things that we will ever do as parents, or just people in general, is like knowing when to step away. And when I'm doing my current show now, the next chapter, I'm definitely, I was talking to my producer, and I think I'm probably going to try to do a series with parents, but particularly like focusing on former elite athletes who now have kids that are competing at a fairly high level. And I don't want to generalize, and this is purely anecdotal, but I think like the things that I've seen from a lot of my peers and the people that I've met who have kids playing at the next level is they know what to do, which is, number one, they start off their kid and they let them play multiple sports and they do it for fun. Number two, once their kid starts getting really good, they find a really good coach who is good technically and foundationally. And number three, they step away and they just hand off the kid, they drop them off, and they're like, this is not my alley. This is where the coach steps in, and I'm going to back off. And so I understand, the challenge that parents have, because I think there's also a lot of confusion, and it's a system that is so fragmented now. And I feel for parents, and I'm going to be a sports parent, or maybe I'll be a parent regardless whether he plays sports or not. But just like really figuring out how to navigate all that stuff. And it's not really easy.
Prim, what drove you back just a few years ago? You picked up tennis again. I'm not sure, where are you in that journey? And it sounded like part of it was that you needed that closure that you never got back in college.
Yeah, it was absolutely that. So, I had around 30 years old, I realized that I needed some help. So I went and I sought some help. I found a therapist and counselor, and I started counseling. And, I had suffered an eating disorder. I developed one when I was really like 18 years old. And not surprisingly, it happened at a time when I had suffered 2 stress fractures on my back. And it was the first time that tennis was no longer a part of my life. So I kind of like battled it on and off throughout my 20s. And I realized I needed some help. And I recognized that, like, when I was in counseling, like there was just this snag. There was something that like I couldn't let go. And roughly 6 years in, we were able to recognize that like that little snag that was not allowing me to move forward had to do with how my career ended, because I had put so much time and effort. I had moved to Florida with my mom. My family split apart. They didn't get divorced, but they split apart so my mom could move with me to the tennis academy. Put so much time and sacrifice and effort and all this stuff. And I just felt it was just very undramatic. I had 3 surgeries. it's like, it's not like I went out winning a national championship. I didn't go pro really. It was just so undramatic. And I was like, this is it. And this is all I have to show for it. And so I, talking with my husband, who ended up being kind of like the vehicle and the executive producer behind all this. And, he's like, how would you feel if you went back and played again? And at that point, it had just happened after I realized that what was keeping me from moving forward with tennis and all this other stuff was like being so happy about how my career had ended at Duke and not going out on my own terms. And so that's kind of like how it all started. And, and that's what I went back to go and play. And I thought that, we thought that maybe capturing this a little bit would help people understand this transition and maybe help them along the way about, or at least give them a little validation, knowing that another athlete had struggled a little bit as well. And so my whole purpose was just to go out on my own terms and find closure to that. And I did. It was like one of the most amazing experiences. It did end on another shoulder surgery, but that was not necessarily what I had intended, and also led to our first child, Duke. So that's another story, but it ended up being a wonderful experience. So yeah.
So it sounds like you found the fun again.
I did. I went back and I played for myself. Yeah. I mean, that's ultimately what it was, and I think my experience at Duke was just like, it was just all around really tough. I was kind of like losing myself. I was trying to figure out how to be a good student, how to be a good athlete, and find myself on a very, we were top 5 in the country, and it was so much fun, but it was so hard, and so this time around, it was about fixing all the things that what I had considered were not productive or were wrong. So this time around, I trained differently. It was different. I played for myself. I played the way I wanted to play. It was really healing. And I certainly hope that athletes can go out on those terms themselves too.
So in the olden days, people were told that you had to do the one thing. Like, it was really important when people talked about your brand and what you do. It's like, pick the one and go with it so that other people outside of you understand who you are and know like when to call you. And in the past couple days, I've seen the word multi-hyphenate come up a few times. And so I don't know if that's the new trend, but multi-hyphenate seems to be a way that people are embracing their full lives. So starting with you, Prim, between being a model and a journalist and professional athlete and TV anchor, ESPN star, all of these different things, and now you're getting your PhD, what are the parts that it's okay to keep separate and just to cultivate it on its own? And then what's the thing that brings them together for you?
I think that this generation and these times are so different that you can keep some things separate, but I think if you can align a lot of things, I think, in my opinion, things will flow a lot more. When I first started out in my athletic career, it was just tennis, and that can be really potentially dangerous and threatening, because when you put all your eggs in one basket and you develop this one-dimensional identity and sense of self, when that's no longer there, then that's your foundation isn't very strong. And it's also important to recognize that we're not just one thing. We're not just an athlete. We're not just a mom. We're not just a wife. We're not just a girlfriend. We're not just a woman. It's intersectionality. I am a woman. I am an Asian woman. I am a woman with brown skin. I am a wife. I am a former athlete. I'm a producer. I'm an entrepreneur. I am all those things. And I think it's like recognizing all those different identities and all the passions that you have. And the further along that I've gone in my career, I think it's also like melding our personal passions and also our values with the work that we are doing right now. And sometimes earlier in our careers, we can't make that happen. I don't think that we can necessarily at 25 years old, like at a point in your life, in your professional career, where really your job is to like work as hard as you can and to get as much experience as you can and all that other stuff. But then as you evolve later into your career, you begin to start to, you can say no to things, and you've worked your way up through, you know, various corporate ladders or whatever. And you begin to start to see all these different priorities where you're like, these are my values now, and I have a really good handle on them. And I think it's really important to kind of like meld all those things, not only with my home life and my personal life, but also my professional and my aspirational life, if that makes sense. That's especially important for women today, because you're right. I think that, like, you know, the levels of anxiety and even depression and stress are greater than ever among women, but that's because we've held on to the traditional roles and then we've added more. So now it's like, now we have to be a mom and a wife and the caregiver and young always and no wrinkles and fit and have a career and be, you know, like all these things. And it's just numbing. It's, you know, it's a lot. But I think it's giving yourself permission to be all those things and to do whatever you want. And, you know, I think it's important to recognize, I was talking to an economist about just like jobs and occupations, and the trends are no longer that we have 3 or 4 jobs across our lifetime. It is now 5 to 7 careers, not jobs or occupations, 5 to 7 careers for this generation. Literally, that is like, that was one of a renowned economist telling me that. And because of that, we don't have a choice. The generation that we're talking to right now, if you're 20 something years old, or even if you're my age and you're in your 40s, you don't have a choice to like do something and be with a company for 30 years. That's just not an option, especially with the advancements in technology. Like people are getting laid off, you know? And so our job is to be malleable and to embrace all these different parts.
I would even pose the same question to you, Karla, because you've got private practice, you've got the mental game coaching and the Ever Strong coaching business, but you're also a competitive athlete and have taken on doing 10,000 kettlebell swings. Like there's a kettlebell swing challenge. So you're like doing 10,000 kettlebell swings each month right now as well. And, you know, kids, mom, everything. So I pose the same question to you: is how do you integrate or honor all those parts of you?
Well, the one thing I like to tell people is I'm never bored. So that's the best part about it, is I never have to wonder what am I going to do next, because there's always something available to me. But certainly, like Prim, like you were saying, it's so important to be able to enjoy a multitude of things, because sometimes something gets taken from you. And if that's all you were leading on, it's a problem. And same thing, like if you only ate one thing all the time, you would lack nutrition at some point. And with so many things, we talk about diversification, whether it's our investments or our interests, even when you, like you were talking about earlier, showing children a variety of sports, but it's also got to be a variety of activities, because maybe they're really good at art, or even if they're not, if you look into art therapy or the therapeutic aspects of playing with clay or finger painting or drawing in the sand or whatever it might be, some of these things are free enjoyment. There's no cost. You really don't need a whole lot. And you can get a lot out of it. And there's a lot of decompression that comes from engaging in activities that are not expecting anything from you. It's not going to be in front of an audience. There isn't a goal to attain. It's really just for you. So what do you do when you retire? What do you do when your career is no longer working for you? What do you do when you find out this major is just not jiving? What do you do when there's no game to play or the power is out? What do you do? And having a variety of things that you've cultivated that you like and that you're interested in just always gives you something that's going to entertain you, and you can entertain yourself and feel fulfilled. Hang your own painting on the wall. You did that one. And that feels really good.
I think getting rid of the shoulds too. I think if you're a client who's an accountant by day and then a competitive jiu-jitsu martial artist, you know, on the outside, but takes both 100% like all in. And I think if we let go of those, I should be doing this, or I should do more here. If we can let go of the shoulds and just really be in the moment with the different aspects of ourselves, there's so much power in that. So just in closing, Prim, along those lines, being in the moment and what's next for Prim Siripipat, the next chapter. So is that where do people find that, and where should people be looking for you for the next thing that's coming for you?
Yeah, actually, we put it on pause because I started the PhD program.
Mm-hmm.
That was quite a lot to handle. So now that I've got 1 year under my belt, we're about to relaunch it within the next couple of weeks. So that'll be fun. But you can find that on Spotify. We'll make some announcements in terms of like what exactly partnerships we have with regards to that. But yeah, you can check out the show, and that will be kind of an ongoing thing. And I'm still doing a little freelance broadcasting on the side. And so, I'll let everybody know I'll be popping up here and there. I'm obviously still heavily involved in the tenants community and all that jazz. So, yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram there with my very long last name, lots of I's and lots of R's and P's.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being here today, and exciting to see the connection between the two of you as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It was such a pleasure to talk to you both. And go Blue Devils. I had to say it.
Go Blue Devils. That's right.